Welcome to the MoxStars podcast. I am Menace, one of your hosts, and I'm here. Oh, almost forgot my sound drop. And I'm here with Flash.
What up?
What's up, dude? How are you?
Nothing. I kind of heard those drops in the background. So whatever you did, it's finally working.
Let's go. The settings change a little bit from week to week. I'm over here fudging with the soundboard. Just so you know, I want you to be able to hear this stuff. It's important that you're as immersed into the show as I am. And as our viewers are.
For new listeners, anytime that there's like silence on the podcast, I just assume that there's a sound effect playing that I am not hearing in my headphones as we record this.
Can you hear this?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
That's the only one I hear. For whatever
It's the
reason,
best
that's the only one that
one.
actually comes through.
It's the best one. So at least you can hear that one. That's what really matters. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is the #1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. And if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're not liking, subscribing, and ringing that bell for more notifications, you should be, because we are at 186 subscribers. We are so freaking close to eclipsing that 200 mark. And when we do, we're throwing a party. Tons of Dr. Pepper and crushed ice will be there. But you can also find us on all major podcasting platforms. I noticed that was something that I didn't put in the description before, but I will from here on out. We're on Spotify, Apple, everything. Everything. There you can leave us a 5-star review to make us look super duper cool, but I don't know if you can make us look much cooler than being the naughty boys of cardboard. You can also join our Discord server, where I've sort of like reconfigured a few things on there. We have an onboarding process. If you're listening to this, you haven't gone through that, you're already on the server, make sure you go do that. And then I also put in all the different colors for cEDH, like color pie, shards, nonsense, all that stuff. So you can find your community there and gather, talk about deck lists, things you're brewing up, whatnot. And you can also support us directly on Patreon by becoming an official Pepperhead for $3 a month. That gets you one free entry into each of our bi-weekly giveaways. And you can become a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead for $5 a month, like Will Rule, K Mr. K, UWP Quirts, D-Mun82, Tommy Cypher, and Jacob Hibbard. The list grows and grows. That tier is limited, so make sure you get on there and jump into that tier. That gets you 2 free entries into each of our bi-weekly giveaways, which this week is this Misty Rainforest playmat signed by the artist, Seb McKinnon, Fallen from Grace. But that does not diminish its value. The playmat goes for roughly $100 on eBay. We're giving that away at the end of the show. But today, we are talking about a couple things. We are getting into some of the spoilers from Bloomborough, which seems to be an incredibly exciting set for me. I don't know why, but it's just hitting all those buttons that I thought I didn't think this was gonna hit. Like, I was just waiting for another gimmicky MKM like Murders at Karlov Manor set, but it's actually striking a lot of chords that I like about a set design and stuff like that. Like, art and immersion aside, the set actually looks pretty cool, and we're starting to see. I think we've seen about 90% of the set as of today of this recording. And next week, we'll be doing a full set review on Bloomborough. And the other half of today's show, we'll be talking about Tivit, a cEDH decklist breakdown, and, and a few different methods that I used to go through and find the differences in how Tivit has grown since its release, since its arrival on the scene from New Capenna. So there is, A lot, maybe. Well, Tivit's very refined, but there's definitely plenty to talk about still. So we'll get into that later in the episode. Let's start with the story of Bloomborough. I have not read it. It is out, but from what I can tell from the artwork, this is the fox weasel thing from Dora the Explorer, conniving with a bunch of other weasels and snakes to bring forth this creature of destruction to destroy the forest that all of our little otters, frogs, bunnies, and mice live in. Does that sound?
That's kind of the plot of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Actually, yeah.
Is there a token human character,
not as
detective?
Maybe not as busty as the ones depicted in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I know you're talking about the guy, but I mean, there's
Talking about Bob Hoskins. Put some respect on his name.
Oh, Bob Hoskins, respect.
Super Mario himself. I've named his two worst roles.
I forgot that was him.
Actually, not worst roles. He's good in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah. I mean, that movie is great regardless. So I think this set, if it follows basically the same structured storyline, I'm okay with everything that happens here. But Bloomborough has a lot of exciting new cards. It also has a lot of exciting reprints with this special guest. This is the biggest special guest launch I think I've seen in a set so far. We're getting cards like Toski reimagined. We're getting a Sylvan Tutor reprint, which is big. We're getting a Ledger Shredder reprint, Relentless Rats, Kindred Charge, Frogmite for all of those modern players. Teferi Time Raveler depicted as a wise bird. And then, we're getting all the we're getting Rat Colony, Relentless Rats. There's obviously Rat Commanders that are being printed in the main set. A lot of Commander reprints here. Ishai, Kaikar, and the Gitrog monster. Derevi is getting a sweet reprint. And Gilded Goose, Ant Queen, we're getting a Birds of Paradise, a couple more legendary rats. Karn the Great Creator as well, depicted as a tree of sorts. But in our set, Parter Avails as not a crane, heron. Is that a heron? I don't know. My avian knowledge just isn't there to properly identify what species of bird that is. We also have Luminous Broodmoth. There's this set. I'm not sure if these are like Commander reprints, which is like this set symbol here. That's kind of what it looks like. It looks like a flower shield. But then the special guest stuff is, like the star thing or whatever. But outside of those reprints, which are all spicy and lovely and welcomed, we always could use reprints of Birds of Paradise, seeing as it is currently the most played card in all of cEDH and Commander. We're getting a bunch of new cards as well. And we talked about it a little bit last week, but we're getting the return of classes. And so they're all framed around this. It's called the talent cycle. The one card I want to talk about, the villain of the set, I think we're still going to see a couple more mythics. There are obviously some pretty cool cards as we continue to scroll down on YouTube. One, before I go to the villain, Rotten Mouth Viper Flash is a card you're going to want to know about. It is 5 and a black elemental snake, 6/6. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of non-land permanents. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrificed this way. Whenever Rottenmouth Viper enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. Then for each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Wah wah wee wah. I really like that. I feel like you can just proliferate this in standard or in constructed and just make this thing go totally nuts, out of control. I imagine this comes down as early as turn 3 as a 6/6 in standard. So and then you start pressuring opponents' life totals. The only thing that it doesn't have is Ward, which is probably why it's going to die to a Go for the Throat as soon as it enters the battlefield.
Hey, Ward, that's a preview of our main topic.
Indeed. So there are a couple new cards that sort of like lend to Bloomburrow's immersion. There's this card called Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest, which is a legendary bird dragon. I think that's the first creature of that particular type. That is, I can't tell if that card's a villain or not. I think it is, but the weasel that I'm looking for is coming up. It's got to be here somewhere. 1 second. Here it is. The infamous Cruel Claw. 1, a black, and a red. This card makes my Menace to Society deck work because it is a 3/3 with Menace. Whenever the infamous Cruel Claw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. So a 3/3 with Menace that allows you to cast cards for basically for free. So you're exiling the top card, you're trading a card in your hand to be able to cast that card for free. Top deck manipulation is huge here. So I love the card. I think it's amazing. The artwork's really cool too. We will see how it plays on Arena once it comes out. I'm burning all of my Mythic wildcards to make my Menace to Society deck finally function the way that it should with Labyrinth Raptor and whatnot. So, Bloomburrow set review coming next week.
Hey, I see something that is of interest to me.
Oh,
new cards. Now that we're looking at them.
Oh yeah,
Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, this elemental fish.
Yeah. Colorless, 3 blue. Power and toughness equal to the number of islands you control. When it ETBs or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's now an island. And the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn cost 1 blue or colorless, less to cast for each land you control with the flood counter on it. That seems really good.
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering what the ceiling on, because I read this last night, and I was wondering what the ceiling on something like this could be. I mean, even the card right next to it, Portent of Calamity, I feel like goes right along with this, where it is X and a blue for a sorcery that says reveal the top X cards of your library. For each card type, you may exile a card of that type from among them. Put the rest into your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. If you exiled 4 or more cards this way, then put the rest of the exiled cards into your hand. So this is like a sorcery with delirium in a way, or like cares about card types in a similar way to like Tarmogoyf, like the different numbers, or like I should say like Atraxa. So with Eluge, I guess since it can make things cost 1 blue less or a colorless less, you could just fire this off from your hand without paying any mana at all. I think that's the first time we've seen that type of effect, right? Where it's like, hey, we're actually going to reduce the blue cost. And in addition, we'll also reduce the colorless cost if you've already reduced the blue as far as it can go. So, are you, I guess the question for you, Flash, is what ceiling do you see with it?
I mean, I don't know. Does it have commander potential for you? I mean, I just think that's a really cool card.
Yeah, I think it's the first GAR we've ever seen depicted in the artwork, which is awesome. Alligator GAR, one of the most savage fish on the planet. I don't know if it has commander potential for me because I'm not a mono blue player, as you know. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that is limiting for me on it is the put a flood counter on target land, it's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. I remember the Quicksilver Fountain, I think is the name of the card, that just straight up nukes a land. Like that land becomes an island and it loses all other types. Where like this one is like, no, this one is an island plus its other types, where like it's sort of like, I don't know, you are gonna have islands with Eluge. And then I look at it like, I want to be able to put flood counters on my opponent's lands to limit their resources. And I think that's where this would become potentially very powerful. But it's a little bit limited in that scope. So that's where my apprehension comes from for this, as far as like being a commander. I want to take people's resources away with that. And it doesn't let me. But I do think, because it's, I would say...
What about the free spells? A free spell on each turn. So 4 free spells a turn cycle. Does that not appeal to you?
You're saying the, the first instant or sorcery you cast each turn costs blue or 1 color less for each land you control with a flood counter. Well, that means you have to start targeting your lands with this ability.
Okay.
I don't know. Sometimes my brain just is too smooth for cards like this.
I mean, I think that's the part that's interesting to me, is that it's potentially giving you 4 free spells a turn cycle.
Yeah. Sure. In Commander, I see. Yeah. The like as it enters, you put a counter on a land.
And actually, number one, the thing that's interesting to me is that it depicts a GAR. Obviously, that's number one. Number 2, 4 free spells a turn cycle in Commander.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? In Commander, even at high power, like most spells above 2 mana, like are, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the average mana value of cards in cEDH decks is 2 or less. So, like this coming down, entering. So one thing that I see right away is that Jeweled Lotus can bring this out turn 1. So land Lotus enters, flood counter on land. As long as you don't miss a land drop, you can sit there and you can fire off as many of those 2 mana counter spells, like 1 per turn, as long as you have cards in hand. So it's like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It has, so there's some interesting things going on there then, because let's say you do that turn 1 Jeweled Lotus land, even though you're tapped out, you have 1 island in play now, right? So in theory, as long as you have a 1 mana counter spell in hand, you have pseudo protection on this commander.
True.
Like a lot of times, this card comes with pseudo protection, right?
Yeah.
And then the ceiling then for me is like, is there a blue deck that is looking? Is there probably a mono blue deck if we're thinking about this as the commander? A mono blue deck that wants to play big mana, but has been limited by the traditional need in blue to leave mana up for counter spells.
I see. So in competitive play, resource management is obviously king. Like managing the number of cards, managing the number or the amount of mana you have. And you're saying that essentially this on turn 1 of coming down nets you potentially 4 free mana and counters like potential protection, depending on what's in your hand. And then turn 2, it would offer you the potential of 8 free mana and multiple spells being cast for free. I guess the ceiling, or like right away.
So then you can have like, is there something in mono blue where you want to play a heavier top end where like maybe you're playing this as your commander going up into Hullbreaker Horror, and like a few of the other like sort of battle cruiser type pieces that you can choose among, like what's we looked at them in a couple previous lists. Like, those chunky 7 CMC boys with real nice effects. the whole time, like you have, because of the bottom ability on this, you can play free spells from your hand and still interact in the game while just like investing all your resources in like a real heavy top end to take over.
Yeah.
Like, and this at the same time, if you're putting those flood counters on things, like, its power and toughness, like this can grow into a threat itself.
I'm doing a quick search right now to find everything with a flood counter on it. And yeah, it is Quicksilver Fountain. So you can play things like Quicksilver Fountain. You can play, like, it looks like there's a few Simic cards with it, but Aquatex Will. Like, if you go ahead, so if you play Eluge turn 1, you get a free Aquatex Will, which puts a flood counter on target land. And then if you control Merfolk, you draw a card. Unfortunately, you wouldn't. I'm just trying to see, like, what other cards with flood counters could you, like, potentially play here that are viable to, like, make this work. Like, there's
no, I mean, I don't think, I feel like anything that's doing flood counters is going to be not good enough to include in the deck. Like, but in blue, you can flicker this with Displacer Kitten, because it's whenever it enters, you're adding flood counters as well.
Right.
So I would focus on the flicker end of that. And then you really only need to get up to 4 or 5 flood counters, let's say, right? Max. But think about that top end then. If you're getting free instant and sorceries up to 4 or 5 CMC, like, you can just, like, you're leaving, like, you have protection as long as you have cards in hand, and then, like, you can play free extra turn spells.
Right. Like, yeah, and you would be probably playing that Archmage from Strixhaven that allows you to draw cards when you cast spells. So, now you're opening up a can of worms. Congratulations.
Hey.
This
can of GAR.
A can of GAR. A big old can of tuna here with Eluge. So whenever it enters, so right, you flicker it potentially with Displacer Kitten. You also have different, like, lines with that. With Invasion of Arcavios allows you to, with Displacer Kitten, to do a few loops, allows you to
generate. That's one of your pet cards. You can get that in there.
Yeah, it allows you to generate infinite loops with mana, and recasting certain spells. Oh, man. You would, just going down the list of my brain, I'm just, like, imagining firing off the world's nastiest Seagate Restoration with this, as long as you're able to, like, prolong the game, even to turn 4. Like, if you were able to land this and have a scenario where each of your lands has a flood counter on it, like, firing off a 3 colorless mana Seagate Restoration would be nasty. The thing is you are telegraphing the shit out of what you're doing. So, you have to have the cards to back up that strategy, for whatever it is. I don't know.
I see potential here as mono blue mid range.
Okay. Yeah. I would be curious to build it. Definitely. To, like, see.
maybe I'll theory craft it after this or something.
Yeah, to be like, what spells, like, right away, if it lands with a Jeweled Lotus in a land, you can fire off a sleight of hand. You get card advantage right away. Like, little things like that. How many spells can I cast for free that just allow me to Pot of Greed my way to victory? Like, is this deck just full of, like, draw 2 cards, like the 3 mana draw 2 cards?
I think it's basically cantrips, counter spells, into Hullbreaker Horror, Tide Spout Tyrant. Is that the card I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Some, like, Sphinxes, and some, like, extra turn spells.
You could play something
like that.
You could play no other creature cards than just this as the commander, and then play, like, Transmogrify. There's one Transmogrify effect in blue.
And
then you would just automatically hit Hullbreaker.
I think that's an idea.
Yeah.
Or if you want to throw one of the Eldrazi Titans in there, like, I think maybe a Kozilek, or an Ulamog in here
Yeah,
could be great as well.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, wheels are turning. Theorycraft this. Come back to me next week, and we'll talk more about it. All right. Bloomborough, as it seems, has a very exciting mono blue mythic commander on the horizon. And if you are as excited about this set as we are, make sure you leave a comment on YouTube letting us know. And by the way, the results of last week's survey were that we should do a set review on this, so that's why we're doing it next week. And this week we have another survey up there helping us determine which of the next 5 tokens that we're going to be working with Deathmilk Designs on. So make sure you get on there if you're a patron and cast your vote for the next set of tokens. All right, let's get into Tivit. And Tivit, Seller of Secrets, is, gosh, one of the most annoying commanders to ever be printed, because as soon as it arrived on the scene, it started making waves. I think that when a commander is a 2-card, there's a 2-card combo involving the commander, it immediately reaches that potential for being viable. Tivit is a 6 mana commander, 3, a white, blue, and a black. So Esper is your shard. You're a 6/6 flying ward 3. That's what you were waiting for, Flash. The
Ward 3,
Ward 3.
as we said earlier.
It has an ability.
Play.
Yeah, you hate to play against Ward 3. It has an ability.
Yeah, that is a high ward cost, by the way.
Yeah.
I think Wizards has figured out since then that is prohibitive. Like, it might as well just be like untargetable.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost feels like Shroud, but way better. Like hexproof, but more baity. Like, people can target it, and if they pay the ward 3, you are playing in a refined set of cards that will allow you to counter whatever they just cast. Like, they will have paid the mana, and you will laugh at them as you swan song their piece of removal away. But Tivit has an ability called Council's Dilemma. Whenever Tivit enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, you investigate. For each bribery vote, you create a treasure token. While voting, you may vote in additional time. And that's for all voting mechanics. Tivit allows you to gain an extra vote. So, Flash, I'm gonna proc you quick, put you on the spot. What does Council's Dilemma mean? Oh man, you have to vote. Each player votes, and they either give you a clue or a treasure. And that's gonna trigger 5 times. You're gonna get 5 artifacts out of this, regardless. So what is the meaning in potentially generating 5 artifacts?
Oh, Time Sieve.
That's the one. Time Sieve is the 2-card combo with Tivit that has allowed it to rise the ranks. It is currently number 5, losing a little bit of ground to Rogsai, as we talked about last week. And its conversion rate has been dropping, but just this last month, Tivit ended up winning a tournament. Because, well, Tivit and Time Sieve is, even though you know it's coming, it is just too hard to stop. Time Sieve, do you have that one in front of you, Flash?
Blue, black, tap, sack 5 artifacts, take another turn after this.
Hey, there it is. Time Sieve with Tivit is the end of the game, usually. And what it does, Tivit enters, creates 5 artifacts. You tap this, sacrifice the 3 clues and 2 treasures, because likely, if you don't have Time Sieve, the Tivit voting structure, let's say, like the ballots of votes that will be cast, it is likely that you will vote for treasure twice and that your opponents will vote for investigate. Like, so you get 3 clues, 2 treasures. so that you can crack one of those clues right away if you need card draw, or you just sack all 5 to Time Sieve and start the infinite turn loop, because once you take your next turn, Tivit will no longer have summoning sickness, and you'll just, as long as each opponent doesn't have a flyer, you'll be able to punch somebody and then generate an extra turn. Until you, if someone does have a flyer, until you remove that flyer, you bounce that flyer, you exile it, whatever you need to do, and then the loop keeps rolling. So as we go through the list, we'll see that since it's been out for a little over 2 years now, that the formula has been figured out, that there are 95 cards that are all the same across our first 3 lists. And then on our final list, we'll go back to the beginning of Tivit and we'll look at where it was and how it has, reflect on how far it has come. So right off the bat, pretty much every one of the lists has one solo planeswalker, and that is Teferi Time Raveler. For 1 a white and a blue, each opponent can't cast spells, or can only cast spells at any time they could cast a sorcery. You can also +1 it to give your sorceries instant speed ability. And then -3, return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand. Draw a card. So the reason for this, yes, it is a pseudo Grand Abolisher, but it is also a backup combo piece with Displacer Kitten and one of your artifacts. So it'll allow you to basically generate infinite mana to go get your Tivit and start the loop. Because once you generate that infinite mana, you can then bounce Tivit an infinite number of times, generating infinite clues, and then using your infinite mana to crack all those clues, draw your entire library, and win the game. Having cards with utility like this, and when you're playing at a competitive level, at potentially the being one of the top 5 decks of all time in cEDH, is that they need to have multiple outlets and multiple forms of utility. Otherwise, they just don't make the cut. So that's why certain stacks pieces that are just stacks pieces don't make the cut anymore. Like that's why Dauntless Dismantler, ever since it was announced, started seeing play as a second form of Blind Obedience, but a little bit better. So Dauntless Dismantler, if you're unfamiliar, 1 and a white, artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped, so very one-sided. And then it has XX and a white, sacrifice Dauntless Dismantler, destroy each artifact with mana value X. So this part is not, this part is like symmetrical. The other part is not. You can still wipe your treasures and your clues with Dauntless Dismantler, but most of the time, if you're doing that, you're trying to prevent the game from ending. So it's a really great utility piece that has, like I said, multiple forms of utility. And as we go through, I think Drannith Magistrate is really the only creature that can if you're in white, is justified as the best stacks piece that you can play. Keeping commanders off the board is usually a good thing, and that has proven to be strong enough to see play. But the creatures are pretty well refined here. We're just seeing the best that Esper has to offer. And ever since the One Ring arrived on the scene last year, Phyrexian Metamorph has been folded back into rotation just because it can copy the One Ring. If anybody else has played it, that's how popular it is. But we're seeing, Opposition Agent, Ranger Captain of Eos, potentially the best white card in cEDH. Then we got Bowmasters. Lotho just helps you get to Tivit that much sooner, also generates the artifacts. So, Lotho can actually be the instigating factor to popping off with Time Sieve as well. So since Time Sieve is just 2 mana, every turn cycle, Lotho has the potential of generating, 4 treasures. So you could end up just sitting on a bunch of treasures, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'll cast Time Sieve, take an extra turn. That'll get me to Tivit, and then I'll cast Tivit and then loop through and end the game. So greater utility there as well. Flesh Duplicate is awesome for copying a dockside on the battlefield to help further progress your game plan. So creatures here in tournament lists that are figured out, tournament lists that are winning, are pretty well refined. I would say the weakest card out of all of them is Gilded Drake, and that is saying a lot because it's so freaking strong. So it just, like, I guess stealing someone's commander, swapping it for that, has proven to be worth it for them. So yeah, that's the one card that if I was looking at something to cut, I would probably look at cutting Gilded Drake. But that's not for me to decide. This clearly was an effective list. As we roll down to sorceries, and we're going to see some pretty unique sorceries in the future lists. There's only 5. And I think that's one of the most important things about cEDH is that you have to be able to win at instant speed or be able to interact with the game at instant speed, since 3 more turns are going to be happening before you get yours. So these have to bear weight. Imperial Seal, Demonic Tutor, getting whatever card you need is the best effect in Magic. And it's outside of drawing cards is the best feeling in the world. And then the card that is in every list, it is just the best way to get to Time Sieve, is Transmute Artifact. With how much fast mana you're playing, a Transmute Artifact is like a godsend. You pick that up, or if it's in your opening hand with a Mana Crypt, you are reeling, because you're about to get to Tivit so fast and get to Time Sieve so quickly that it might be a turn 2 win for you. So Transmute Artifact is a very old card. I think it is reserve list. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, Flash?
I think so. I would assume so.
Yeah. It's $442, of course. Probably reserve list. But it is 2 blue mana for a sorcery that allows you to search your library for an artifact and put it into play. And then you have to sacrifice an artifact as an additional cost and then pay the mana difference between the two. So otherwise sacrifice it. So Transmute Artifact, amazing card. Obviously, it's so powerful they said, we're not going to make that one again. Savine's Reclamation, in case Time Sieve is countered, Time Sieve is destroyed, or whatever. Savine's Reclamation has proven to be one of the strongest pieces of strongest spells and recurring permanents. And then Toxic Deluge, obviously for the lockdown board state, a lot of creature-based stacks become an issue over the course of time. Plus, if Tivit's out and you haven't been able to get to Time Sieve and someone is locking you down through some sort of like collector oof, whatever board state, Toxic Deluge is just the perfect spell for this, because there aren't many creatures that are larger than Tivit. Tivit's a 6/6. So paying 4 to get rid of like an Eidolon of Rhetoric is beautiful. Like to God, yeah, it's just Tivit's just got such a huge ass. Like big old booty. As we move down, we see the instance package. It is massive. It is nearly a third of the deck. Tainted Pact, Demonic Consultation for the Thassa's Oracle lines, because that is still something you have to be concerned about with this deck. This list is running, maybe it's questionable, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm smoother brain than I thought, but Stifle, I thought, had basically fallen out of all lists. Like in favor of Tidebinder, or I don't know. Maybe Stifle still has a place, but I don't know. It's just so circumstantial, it seems. But, to have this one card in your hand to be able to, I guess it does save the game from time to time. But again, another slot, maybe it's one of those wiggle slots. Out of the 95 cards that are figured out, maybe this is the one that they find and they flex multiple times throughout the course of this deck's history. They've just went through and swapped this in and out until they found what works for them. So, but everything else here, like we said, this is the best that Esper has to offer. Like Muddle and Mixture lets you tutor for a Time Sieve. Silence, Path to Exile, Orm's Chant, the best white instance in like Enlightened Tutor. Go get a Time Sieve. So all the counter spells, no complaints there. War of Invention, go get a Time Sieve. Ad nauseum. Like, this is probably the, like, firing off an ad nause here is pretty risky, just because the mana value on a lot of your things is, well, pretty high, not as low an average value as things like, let's say Blue Farm. Like, Blue Farm's average value is just way, way lower. So firing off an ad nause here and running into a Whir or a Mindbreak Trap or something like that, it is definitely going to hurt. But hey, if you get the Time Sieve, that's all that matters. But the Mana Rocks here, this is something where you are chaining artifacts into other artifacts, generating a ton of mana to get to Tivit as fast as possible. And the one stacks piece here, Grafdigger's Cage, is there because this deck usually can't win against Underworld Breach. Like, those type of loops stop this like dead in its tracks. So Grafdigger's Cage is here to, like, you can tutor this out and it will extend the game indefinitely. Like, this will give you the time that you need in order to assemble your combo and leave your opponents crying and waiting for someone to take care of the Grafdigger's Cage because they don't play removal. And down to the enchantments. This is, again, all based on card advantage, saving the game, and, well, generating artifacts. We have Smothering Tithe, which for a while, I think Smothering Tithe, we had the same conversation with it as we did Rhystic Study at one point, where the collective community about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago was wondering if Rhystic Study was still good enough to be played in cEDH. Like, there were just new shiny toys on the market, and we were like, I don't know, maybe I can find something better. There's nothing better. And I think that same can be said for Smothering Tithe when it comes to a format that wants to move as fast as possible and draw as many cards as possible. Smothering Tithe thrives. So instead of surviving, you will be thriving. For 4 mana, yeah, that's where it seems prohibitive, but it's not. And same with like Trouble in Pairs. 2 and 2 blue. It keeps another Tivit player from winning the game. It keeps things like decks like Rogsai. If you're able to land this early enough or prolong their game plan long enough, Trouble in Pairs will ultimately tell them no, and then also tell a bunch of other decks no, because Last Chance or yeah, I think that's yeah. The extra turn spell at instant speed will get shut down by this, and then also provide you with a ton of card advantage because everybody does 2 things a turn. So Trouble in Pairs, great, wonderful card. We just gave one away not too long ago on one of our giveaways. The land package, this is pure. It is simple. It is, I mean, there's utility lands like Minamo for your One Ring. We've talked about that a couple times in the past. And then Urza's Saga here to help you chain into artifacts, generate mana, do your thing. You can also go get a Grafdigger's Cage to, like we said, prolong the game plan. So, Flash, I see you sent me something.
Yeah, you should open it.
All right, we're gonna check out Flash's new deck list for Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. You've been working hard. Geez, you already have the whole list.
Yeah, plus, well, I mean, I took my old reality chip list and stripped like 25 cards out, added a bunch of stuff in. There's, I haven't really been playing that much for a while. So, there's some cards from the most recent sets that I haven't even considered for the deck yet.
Ooh, Cryptic Command is
EDH
nice.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if some of that cost is Eden, 4 CMC is doable now, right?
Yeah, it becomes way better. Oh man. Okay, I get like it. We'll see what it looks like once it's like playtest. But like you said, if you can fire off,
Are you showing a little preview on the screen?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, once you playtest this, like C double, I love this card. Like, and Atlas has completely convinced me that it is viable and one of the, if not one of the strongest spells from Aftermath. But
Yeah, and also if you only have to pay, let's say, 2 mana for this most of the time,
right.
not bad.
I think this, like, the deck could potentially sneak through and get a win. Like that, no question. I believe in every deck, like, to be able to do that. I guess the reason why we're talking about Tivit today is because it has done it so consistently. So the question here is, same with Nadu, which, here is our weekly Nadu update before we get back to Tivit. It was at 15 last week. Where is it? It's at 11. Nadu is rising the ranks. It's almost top 10. It's at 11 now. But can it do it consistently enough to climb and convert? Sort of, I guess, like Nadu's a little busted. But, this would take a little bit more time. But, if you keep putting in work on this, Flash, your name could be on EDH Top 16 multiple times. No, this list is good. Thank you for sending this to me. And viewers, if you have any opinions on this list, let us know in the comments. If you are listening to us on a podcast platform, make sure you drop in over at YouTube to check out Flash's Eluge, the Shoreless Sea first draft. It looks really, really good. So I love.
Yeah. What are we going to post this? We can post the deck list. Let's actually see if we can refine this. Like I said, it's missing a year's worth of cards, and I really just started thinking of the synergies as we discussed it on air. So
nice. Yeah, I'll put the deck list in the description on the podcast and on YouTube. So getting in and back to Tivit, the second deck list we're going through here is another tournament topper. And, we can see Teferi. It's right back there. This one is notably missing the Displacer Kitten combo. So they're opting to forego that entirely and just use Tivit as sort of a grand abolisher as a form of removal as well. And then they're playing Urza, Lord High Artificer, and Hullbreaker Horror. So that's where the Displacer Kitten line goes away, Hullbreaker Horror comes in, and then bada bang, bada boom, the combo fires off. But Urza is interesting here. I think it's actually really good because you can turn your clues into rocks. It basically just whatever your opponents decide to give you, however they vote, Urza's like, yeah, you're just giving me mana rocks. Like,
yeah, I think the deck really just goes through Time Sieve, right? And so if you're not going to do that, you need something else going on. And this deck has chosen Urza as the something else, right?
Yeah, because Urza will eventually get you to Time Sieve as well. So, like, there is the potential for that. And then other creatures that are different, or at least a little bit different, they're playing Archivist of Ogma, which was not in the first list, and then they're also playing Dauthi Voidwalker. So this is trying to capitalize more on card draw and grave control in the creature, aspect. And then as we move down to sorceries, they're playing Damn, which I love. I absolutely love.
Great
Damn.
card. Love that card.
Yeah, the board wipe potential for like a mid-range locked up board state, and having like Damn and Toxic Deluge is top notch. They're also playing Mnemonic Betrayal, which, as we've covered, is one of the best Dimir sorceries in the game. I think when it came out, I remember when this came out, it was 50 cents. It was like a mythic that people were really confused about, and they're like, this just isn't that good. And, that's just not true. It's actually really good. So much so that it is almost $10, and the foil is $62. So there's that. It's determined to be good, as the secondary market is clearly showing. The instance package on this deck is far, far smaller, but they're running more artifacts in place of that, and they're also playing a counterbalance in the enchantments. So this is a list that has taken the 5 wiggle flex slots and has sort of like tailored the strategy to their own making. Like they're playing Limduel's Vault here, which I was like, when I saw this, I was like, oh, that's actually really, really, really good here, just to like keep looking at the top 5 cards until you see the Time Sieve, and then you pay 1 life for each rotation. You could pay 20 and go through your entire library. You know, it's like they're like this until you see the Time Sieve, or you see 5 cards that you really like that help you get to Time Sieve. Limduel's Vault is looking like an MVP, but an instant like red flag, like if you're an opponent, where it's like if they're firing off a Limduel's Vault, the game might end in the next turn cycle if Tivit's given another turn. So really like the spicy tech there. The counter spells are a little bit different, but I've seen in both lists so far that Spell Snare is getting like seeing play. And the more we talk about cEDH and we do the cEDH breakdowns and we see decks that are playing blue, I think all of them have been playing blue, which tells you a lot. That Spell Snare has been present at pretty much every step of the way. So counter target spell with converted mana cost 2. Let's break this down for a second. When you play Talion, most of the time, which this list is, most of the time you name 2, just because there are so many things that trigger that. And so when you're playing Spell Snare, you're looking at Dockside, you're looking at Thassa's Oracle, you're looking at Underworld Breach, you're looking at Brain Freeze. Oh God, all of the things. Oh, Demonic Consultation, or not Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact is what I meant. There are just so many things out there that are mana value 2 that this happens to just hit. It's almost like 2 mana value things win the game more often than any other mana valued card. So, really, really great. I'm not sure who eventually saw that, but it is definitely, the word has gotten out. Spell Snare is a staple as a counterspell in blue decks. As we move down to the artifacts, this is where they've, again, differed slightly, but they're playing Imposter Mech, I'm guessing to copy Docksides, or to really copy anything. You can copy a Dranith that is not a creature, but an artifact, so a little bit harder to remove. And they're also playing a Cursed Totem, because you are not relying on activating creature abilities. No, like everybody else probably is. 5 color decks are, anything including green is as well. And then they're also playing Sensei's Divining Top to help filter for that time, or for the Time Sieve. So a little bit more play there. And in the enchantments, we have Blind Obedience and Counterbalance. They're also playing Touch of Spirit Realm. But again, we have Smothering Tide there. Just too good in Tivit. Too good to ignore. On to our third list. I believe this list was second place in the tournament I was looking at. And the reason that I picked it was because I saw a card that was really interesting to me, and I'm sure it's pretty interesting to you too, Flash, and it is Nuclear Fallout.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's kind of one of the flex slots that aren't flex slots. Like you see other decks playing Languish in that slot.
Yeah.
Or Damn, I guess, in the most previous list.
Right. And like we said, this is like, Tivit has a big old booty. And so for X and 2 black, each creature gets twice minus X until end of turn, and then each player gets X rad counters. So rad counters, if you're unfamiliar, basically at the beginning, or it's after your draw step, at the start of your pre-combat main phase, you will mill X cards, where X is the number of rad counters, and then for each non-land you mill, you lose a life and then you lose a rad counter. And so what this is yes, it is a board wipe to clear out an ugly board state and then potential mill factor, but it's also an infinite mana outlet that is going to win you the game. This is essentially a Torment of Hailfire, but with far greater utility, and like generate infinite mana, fire off a nuclear fallout, win the game. So that's where I see the ceiling at. I'm so happy to see that something from Fallout is actually seeing play. Here we have a Beseech the Mirror. Unbelievable. Don't know why the other lists aren't quite on this, but you're playing a ton of artifacts, and I think every single list I saw was playing Dark Ritual, so it makes almost too much sense to have Beseech the Mirror here as a way to tutor up whatever you need and cast it. I imagine Time Sieve would be it. Instance. The last deck was not playing War of Invention, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, but this one is. Clearly, these pilots know what's good, and they know how to get to the end of the game and win those games. I think that's a characteristic that actually varies from player to player. I'm not sure what sort of like it happens to me sometimes around the third round of Swiss that if I've lost one of those first 3 rounds, something in my brain goes, I have to win. I have to win this next game. And then I'm a monster. I can't be stopped. And then but like there are some people who that is an innate thing they don't have to trigger. They just do it. And I feel like Tivit players have that natural instinct. So I see it all the time, and they just cannot be denied, especially with a commander like that, which is so strong. Imposter Mech again making an appearance. Wishclaw Talisman, too good, and the enchantment package the same. The lands also the same. So there's not much more. Now, the last list that we're going to look at is going to be a little bit of a different variation on this. I had to like really go down the list to find where Tivit has come from over the course. And this list is a little over a year old, but as you can see, I'm already down at the enchantments. There isn't really much difference here. Mystic Grimoire, Ristic Study, Blind Obedience, Touch Spirit Realm, Smothering Tithe. We go up. Since it's a little over a year old, the One Ring is here. Much of the artifacts are the same. Grafdigger's Cage is here as well. I don't know why this list didn't succeed as much, but maybe it's for things like Stubborn Denial, which is a counter spell that if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell. Otherwise, they can pay 1. So that is a less than optimal card, but they're also playing things like Languish, where Nuclear Fallout wasn't quite available for them yet. So a few less than optimal slots, and then the big difference here is when you get up to creatures and you see them playing some less goal-oriented cards, let's say, where like Lavinia is designed to slow the game down and keep things rolling for you, to extend the game, to give you more opportunities, where more successful decks have just said, no, I'm just going to hyper-focus the Time Sieve, and I'm going to press send and win the game. So you ultimately, even though it's like 3 or 4 slots that we're talking about, what happens is those percentages add up over the course of the day at the tournament and result in less wins, less opportunities, and ultimately less happiness, more sadness on the stack. But we're also looking at other cards like Consecrated Sphinx, which I get. I get that the upside is unbelievable on Con Sphinx, but it's almost like Reanimator builds are the only decks that can really take advantage of Con Sphinx. So things like Kenrith can take advantage of Con Sphinx. it's also a card you can pitch to force a will, force a negation, things like that. Notion Thief is also present here, where other decks have just said, I don't need it. I literally have a commander that prints clues, a commander that prints treasures. So even though I was a little like confused by the initial like Urza play in that second list we saw, I do think Urza would be a much better card here than Notion Thief would be, just because I guess this player is almost...
Notion Thief has been outclassed, I think, in the format.
Yeah.
Right?
We saw what it would take for something to be playable, but then it got banned. And that's Hullbreaker. Or not Hullbreaker. Is that what it is? Hull Smasher? Hullbreaker? Something like that. It's so far banned, I can't even remember its name. But in order for like to punish drawing cards, it has to be 1 mana cheaper than Notion Thief, like to see consistent play, and they took that away from us. There just isn't a card that does it for cheaper than that. So it's almost like it's not worth playing. And Talion is where I think people have found a home. Just getting incidental card draw and then punishing life totals is just it's just better than Notion Thief, than trying to be sneaky and like flash it in and I guess deprive your opponents of resources. I think the downside to Notion Thief is that when someone has a lock on the game, or someone is showing a win condition and somebody needs options, if Notion Thief is down, you have no way to get rid of it. It just sits there and stifles your opponents from interacting and can potentially lose the game. I've seen that multiple times where it's just like, well, I wish I could actually draw an answer to this, but I can't because your stupid Notion Thief is sitting there. So, and I know you don't have answers. You don't even have mana open. Damn Notion Thief. But they're also considering other things like stacks with Dothy Voidwalker and blah, 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 blah. So this was the 100th and 160th ranked deck. And I went through about 40 decks to find this. And this is the first one that I found that had significant differences from those first 3 that we looked at. And that just goes to show that, like, Tivit, since arrival, has grown for sure, but it has ultimately narrowed itself down into this path of efficiency and drive to get Time Sieve out as fast as possible to win the game. And like I was saying before, it's sometimes the will of the player is undeniable. And with Tivit, it's just, you know it's coming, but you just can't stop it. Now, over the course of time, Tivit's conversion rate has definitely dropped, but that's not to speak against its like merit and what it has done so far and what all the pilots out there have done with it. It is the number 5 deck on EDH Top 16. It has 62 conversions with tournament sizes over 60. And like the next deck is Najeela. And for a long time, Najeela was Queen Bey, you know? It was like, I do think that Najeela will ultimately surpass Tivit in the coming weeks. By the end of the summer, Najeela will have passed it. I think Tivit is going to fall down the ranks. Eventually, it will get passed by Nadu as well. But the more popular that cEDH becomes, the more other decks will convert. And if Tivit just can't seem to get there because it is too predictable, well, that's just fate. That's just fate, my guy. That's just destiny for you. But Kenrith is also rising in the ranks, and Atraxa has been floating between 8 and 10 for a long time as well. So, Tivit, an unbelievable deck. Is it over for Tivit? TBD. We'll see by the end of the summer.
Yeah, is that one of those things where, like, it's already been solved, so there's not a lot of room to improve it from here, where it's almost like one of those decks where it's just like you need a strict upgrade. That's the only way you're going to move a card out of this.
Right.
Besides, the flex slots.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought, is like, what would you have to print in order for Tivit to get better, to like be more consistent? Is it one card, or is it 2 or 3 cards that it needs to consistently compete with decks like Kinnan, with decks like Sisse, like 4-color, 5-color piles, maybe? That we've seen that Kinnan is, Turbo Simic is almost, it's alarming now. People, again, have figured it out, and it's dropped down below 16% conversion rate. And now Tivit is also on the same trend. So are Kinnan and Tivit on their way out? What sort of cards do those decks need to bolster their credibility, or to bolster their consistency, so that we can see these conversion rates like rise again? I'm not sure if it's 1, 2, 3 cards. Is it a sorcery, maybe an instant that says, as an additional cost, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn? Like a one-time use Time Sieve? Like, does that help Tivit get there more effectively? I think you could run some loops.
I don't think the deck wants an extra Time Sieve, though, right? It just wants the one and a way to find it.
Yeah, that's why I'm just like, I'm shrugging my shoulders. I don't know. That's where, like, I'm sitting here wondering, if it's another stacks piece, if it's another tutor. Like, they have access to the best tutors for artifacts in the game. Like, what more could you want? And what, like, I guess it says a lot about, like, alternate strategies that have proven to yield more success. And it does say a lot about how diverse each meta is, with, in its own particular space. But, like, more gravitas to, like, Nadu, which has proven to usurp a lot of the common strategies, and is saying, like, out of all the decks up here, right, like, you can say that all of their conversion rates have been dropping as more commanders become viable. But Nadu is this outlier that is, last time we talked about Nadu, it had a 32% conversion rate. It is at a 35.5% conversion rate now. So eventually we'll get down there, and we'll maybe Nadu will meet us in the middle, and we'll get to talk about it soon enough. But that just says a lot about how strong that card is, and it says how strong the strategy is, and how hard it is to stop, how much card advantage it generates. And Tivit and Kinnan have to be able to keep pace or match what Nadu does, or what these other decks are doing, in order to keep their place in the top 5. So we'll see how it all shakes down. But I've got the optimist in me says there will be something that comes through to keep these decks relevant, and to keep them churning forward. It is time to pick our winner for the week. I've submitted all of our Pepperheads here, and just for proof, I'm going to shuffle. That way nobody thinks it's rigged in any way. If Will Rule wins this, I'm going to be so pissed. But I've shuffled 3 times, and here we go. Please don't be Will Rule. Oh my God. No. Woo! Okay, it's not. Usable object. Congratulations. You have won yourself a Seb McKinnon signed Misty Rainforest playmat. Luckily for you, it is not a super iconic piece of artwork, so a lot of people will just see it and go, wow, what a really pretty playmat you have there. And congratulations. Thank you so much for supporting the show and being a Pepperhead. thank you all for participating and for jumping in, supporting the show as we move forward and as we continue to grow. We appreciate your support. Again, Flash, thank you so much for putting in the work in your downtime to make this Eluge deck. I will make sure to put the deck list in the description below. If you would like to support the show, you can find us on YouTube, where you can like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more notifications. You can also find us on all major podcasting platforms, where you can leave us a 5-star review, make us look super cool. You can join our Discord server, join the conversation there. You can also support us directly by becoming an official Pepperhead on Patreon. For $3 a month, become an official Pepperhead and get a free entry into each of our bi-weekly giveaways, and you can become a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead like Will Rule, K Mr. K, UWP Quartz, D-Mun82, Tommy Cypher, and Jacob Hibbard, and get 2 free entries into each of our bi-weekly giveaways. And your name turns an even darker shade of Dr. Pepper Red on the Discord server.
I mean, that is worth the price alone, right?
Indeed. And you get to support one of the fastest growing cEDH podcasts on the market, and one of the best ones. Not biased in any way. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the MoxStars podcast, the home of the mid-range mindset, the naughty boys of cardboard, and the #1 show on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. We're out of here. Peace.
Bye.